Hey guys, Solomon here. Hope you're having a great day. I thought in today's video, similar to yesterday's video, I could cover a game I played in the recent 2023 Western Class Championship, held in California. Very nice tournament that they held there. And okay, I mean, at this point in the tournament, I'm 2 out of 2, right? The first 2 games, I played the Hippo both times, won both. And now I'm going into round 3, playing as white, right? I'm also going up against someone that's 2 out of 2 by the name of Stuart. And, I start this thing off with G3, right? I play G3. I'm planning to go into Hippo again. By the way, guys, in this tournament, I tried to play the Hippo 5 times. I got the full Hippo setup 4 times. This is the one game that I did not, right? And that's because Black played a pretty interesting move. Pretty quickly here played H5. And I was going, gosh, what the heck? I mean, I've played stuff like this online before, but, in an over-the-board tournament, 2 out of 2, one of the top boards, I just, you just don't see something like that every day, right? You just don't. So I see H5. And, usually in the Hippo, like in my 6-hour hippopotamus defense course, by the way, if you're interested in learning more about the Hippo, I did make, a 6-hour course going through the concepts and ideas. If you're interested, I will leave a link in the description below. All that said, what I usually recommend later on in the middle game is to play H3. Right, whole idea being, if H4, we can play G4. But at this point in the game, I haven't developed, and I think my king safety is going to be put a little bit into question because, Black can play pretty quick moves like, E5, think about D5, preparing F5, just try to blow the position open. It didn't feel like a lot of fun, right? So, instead I played this move of Bishop G2. I kind of wish I thought about this move of Knight F3 a little bit more, simply because it prevents H4. And okay, at that point, I can just pretend like I'm playing a King's Indian attack, maybe transpose to a D4 move, go into some kind of Catalan type system. But okay, I played Bishop G2, H4 is played, and I played D4. Again, in my course, from the Black perspective, I kind of recommend this, right? At least to start. I mean, if Black pushes his pawn like crazy, just ignore it, right? Take some space in the center, right? We're out of the Hippo now, but White here has a solid position, right? We have a central pawn, fianchetto bishop. Black doesn't have anything yet, but just a pawn on H4. And if they want to take, we'll take towards the center, trade off rooks if we need to, and White's fine, right? But here we see the move of D6. At this point, I do decide to capture, and Black plays C6. Now, something that, I think I want to just speak to you guys really quickly on. I could play a move here like Knight F3, trying to hang on to this pawn, but guys, sometimes you just got to look at a pawn and go, you know what, I'm up a pawn. I'm not going to use all of my firepower, all of my energy in this game to hang on to an H-pawn. Why is that? Well, this rook on H8 isn't going anywhere, right? It's extremely comfortable. It doesn't even have to move, and I'm not going to spend this whole game just trying to hang on to a pawn. That's probably going to get lost at some point anyways. So I instead play the move of C4. Here, I'm just trying to take up some space, wiping out half of that 5th rank. And Black here surprises me by playing E5 and then taking on H4. Plugging into Stockfish, it's a good line for Black. I end up taking on D6, and I mean, at this point, guys, I'm like, wow, this is just not what I'm used to, right? Usually when I play the Hippo, like the 4 other games in this tournament, move 10, I have my full Hippo setup, and I go from there. Now it's move 7, and I have a pawn on the 6th rank. Okay, so a very different look. Black continues to take on C4. And I play a little bit of an inaccuracy here, in all honesty, by playing Knight F3. In fact, when I did play Knight F3, my opponent kind of gave that, he kind of gave that surprised look and kind of, that whole thing. And I had a mini heart attack, like, did I just hang a queen or something? Drives me crazy when my opponents do that because I'm like, oh my gosh, did I just blunder? I didn't blunder, but it's not the best move, okay? A better move is just Knight C3, okay? I'm trying to develop quickly here. I need to develop quickly, right? Because this position is opening up, right? And sure, I do have an extra pawn, but Black has this active rook, active bishops as well. And, but really the whole point of Knight C3 is that, sure, I'm going to play Knight F3 as well. But with this Knight C3 move, Black has to work a little bit to win that pawn on D6, right? They have to work a little bit. However, after queen takes, when I play Knight F3, Black can just take this pawn out right away. Why is that? Because I can't capture back. I simply miss this, queen takes C1, and, that's the reason I can't, right? I take your bishop, you take mine, my queen comes back, you win another pawn. And this position's interesting. It almost seems like it's great for White, but, I think Black here definitely has a small edge after just something like Knight D7. If we try to get cute with something like Knight C4, there's a lot of options that Black can play. You could say we're up in development, but our king is definitely pretty exposed. And I got to be careful, right? Because Black is just 1, 2, 3 moves away potentially from castling. So That is definitely not what I want. So after bishop takes, I end up going, you know what? Okay, I made a little bit of a mistake. I'm just going to play knight c3 now, right? We have bishop e4, and I end up trying to trade off queens. There's a lot of different moves here that Stockfish likes, including bishop g2, rook g1, h4. Some of these moves I'm looking at them and I'm going, gosh, what are you talking about, Stockfish? But all that to say, I play queen d4, and it's right under those moves. So queen d4 is a fine move, right? It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It just trades off queens. But here Black plays a very nice idea of bishop h3. Black doesn't want to allow me to play h4. Why is that? Because it gives me space and really gives my pieces room to breathe, right? When you play bishop h3, now this pawn on h2 is feeling a little bit uncomfortable. What I should have done is just avoid a trade and play something like bishop f3 or rook g1. I end up taking, and now this rook is extremely active, right? This pawn, again, can't move. The rook is just pinned down to it, right? And this rook is also attacking c3. So I end up playing bishop e3 to kind of cut that rook off from attacking my knight. And okay, we have knight f6. I castle queenside. And now I play f3. My idea here was just to kind of cut off that rook and free up my bishop, right? Before that, if I move my bishop anywhere, Black can just take on c3, and they're going to have a rook flying in. So I'm going, okay, you know what? I'm going to play f3. You could argue there that I should have thought more about a move like knight f3 or knight f5, but white here is still hanging on. We have g6. Bishop g5 was played, and castling, and now e4. So I'm here. I'm trying to expand in the center a little bit. E4 may have been a little bit too aggressive, right? The moment I play e4, why is it too aggressive? Because it creates a weakness on f3, right? Before that, f3 was very solid, right? I didn't have to worry about it. Now I do, because the second that this knight ever gets kicked off, f3 is simply going to fall, right? So there's not really a way for Black to kick it off right now. If you play something like c5, we have knight b5 ideas getting busy. But, sometimes it's not all about just saving material now. Sometimes it's just about making your position comfortable and being prophylactic in preventing things from happening in the first place. Black here forms a battery ram, right, on my pawn on h2. And at this point in the game, guys, I'm kind of just shaking my head going, you know what, I just need to fight for a draw here, honestly. I mean, Black's position is just way better. I think that really the key pieces that stand out are the rooks, right? Black's rooks are just dynamite. My rooks aren't doing too much at all. Okay, my rook on d1 is okay. It's okay. My rook on h1 is not doing much at all. I actually played rook d2 here, trying to hang on to that pawn. Black here continues to just slowly improve their position with rook h5. I end up capturing off, playing king b1, just trying to get my king to safety here. And and ultimately I swing my rook over to c2. And okay, this is the kind of position here, guys, in which case we need to fight for a draw, right? Of course, when the game starts, we all want to win. But sometimes you got to look at a position and go, okay, I'm just not going to win this. I'm probably not going to win this. Maybe if they blunder or something, but at the end of the day, the best players in the world, they don't just win games. They don't lose, right? So I'm not saying I'm one of the best. I've lost plenty of games in my life. But if you look at Magnus Carlsen, I think what makes him so great is, sure, he wins a lot of games, but more than that, guys, he just doesn't lose. Right, he's had streaks over 100. He had a streak over 100 games, may have been 125. Maybe you guys can fact check me on that. But straight games in which he did not lose a single time. Right, some of those games, Carlsen had a bad evaluation or was in a little bit of trouble. Right, so he's so good at not just winning but not losing. Right, he finds a way to hang on to a draw every time, and that is gonna, really help you. Right, if you can go into a tournament and not lose a game, that's huge. Easier said than done, though. So here we have the move of king d8. By playing rook c2, I'm just trying to eye this king, right? Just trying to eye this king, looking at potential checks, right, in this position. If you move the knight or something, I have knight d5 check, right? I'm looking at knight d5 check now, potentially, although I don't think in this case it would work quite yet. All that to say, I'm looking at these discoveries, right? So Black here just plays king d8. They want to get out of there. I play knight d1, dropping my knight back. And at this point, there's just no way to save my pawn on h2, right? There's no way. So I'm going into an endgame of pawn down. Now I have to fight for a draw, right? Knight f2 is played. I take on h2, knight d3. We have a check. I was actually expecting the move of rook h5 here. Whole idea being that, if the rook goes anywhere else, we have e5, right? Just winning us a piece. But it turns out that against rook h5, we still have the move of e5, okay? And this is, gosh, guys, this is the reason I have a problem with Stockfish. How does Stockfish find stuff like this, okay? It's just crazy. But apparently I still have e5 because Sure, I lose a pawn, but I get it back. With rook takes c6. It's freaking crazy. This did not... Yeah, this, from what I can remember, this just didn't cross my mind. Rook takes c6, right? Just didn't. But the whole idea is that, okay, we're attacking your knight, right? We're attacking your knight. We just got a pawn back, so now we're only down one pawn of material. And if you take my rook, I get a pawn back and your rook. So now we're sitting at even material, and this is a huge win for white. Going down a pawn to even material with only a few pawns on the board. Easy draw for white. Maybe even fight for the win, potentially, right? It can get a little bit dicey. You know, if black plays something like, you know, king e6 and we start trying to go for a race, it can get kind of dicey, but hey, that option is available if black decides to give it, right? So, okay, all that to say, you know, going back, right, to rook c1, black here does not play rook h5, in which case apparently I still had e5 on the board. Instead, black takes on c1, and we have knight d7, right? Now, as you saw in the title, right, you shouldn't resign whenever you have a knight, right? And I think the reason for that is because knights are so unpredictable and they can touch all 64 squares. I usually prefer knights in the endgame because unlike a bishop, like I just said, it can touch any square. A bishop can only see half the board, so you can put your pawns on the opposite color of your opponent's bishop so that it's pretty much just rendered ineffective, right? And that's what I try to do in this game. I started out with f4, right? Here I'm just trying to make some space, you know, prevent ideas like knight e5 or anything like that. We have knight c5, in which case, okay, I take, drop my knight back to e2. Guys, the reason I want to do this is because if bishop e3 would check, I want my pawn f4 to be protected, right? So I'm protecting that pawn. And you know the drill in the endgame, right? The number one thing I recommend to players, once you reach the endgame, unless it's a queen endgame and there's queens on the board, you want to activate your king. So we both start just throwing our kings out there. And now at this point in the game, guys, is a3 and b4, are these good moves? No. Why is that? Because they're on dark squares and black has a dark squared bishop. Black can make these pawns targets for the rest of the game. So instead, I put my pawns on light squares, and notice now how this bishop just can't do anything against these pawns for the rest of the game. The bishop just can't, right? Black here takes on a4. I capture back. We have f5, and I now play knight g3. Bishop e2. I go right back. At this point in the game, when I'm trying to figure out how to draw, I realized that I can't just sack everything and end up with a pawn and a bishop in the corner, right? Because this bishop is a dark squared bishop, right? If you guys aren't familiar, let's just say everything's off the board and there's only an a pawn, right? Only an a pawn in this position. And black has a dark squared bishop. Black is going to win. But if it's a light squared bishop, it's a draw because black can't force this king out, right? If you want to learn more about that endgame, I'm sure there's a lot of different places that you could look that up. Maybe I should do a video about it, honestly. Very interesting endgame idea. All that to say, though, it just doesn't work here, right? Because if I sack everything and end up going down a pawn and a bishop, this bishop is going to very easily kick my king out. But there is this idea of just going down a full piece with no pawns on the board. So here I'm going, okay, they have 4 pawns, I have 3. If I can get all of their pawns off the board, it's a draw. It's a draw. That's it, right? Even if I have to give my knight, it's a draw, and that's what I'm wanting here. We have king d6. Here I continue to trade down, and I play king c4. So this is the first instance in which case we had this position. Black played bishop e3. I just want to mention that it's hard for black to make a ton of progress here, right? It is. I mean, c5, let's say black plays c5. We just play knight c1, right? Again, knights are absolutely brutal in the endgame. This bishop can only attack this pawn. This knight has a ton of different things that it can attack and defend, right? Bishop e3. You know, at this point we have a couple of different options. I think the computer actually has all 3 of these. It's just a dead even draw. I think the easiest is probably just knight d3, right? Defending and attacking. You know, if you want to see something like bishop d4, we can just, you know, go straight back with the knight, and that's totally fine. If king c6, we can throw in a check, right? King goes over, knight g6, defending the pawn, right? I mean, if the king comes back, we'll check you again, right? We also now have this possibility of even just thinking about knight e7 and taking on c4, and then at this point, just setting up a fortress, right? It's going to be pretty much impossible for black to make progress here because we have such great control of those light squares. Thanks to our pawn being on a4. But okay, I play the move king c4. Black here does not push to c5, which would have been a big mistake, right? I mean, why would black give me key squares like d5 and b5? If anything, white can start to think about winning chances there, so we don't see that. Notice here how hard it is for this king to get through, right? This is what I wanted. Whenever the king was on d6, no matter who move it was, and it didn't really matter a ton, but notice this king just can't get through, right? b5's covered. c5 and d5 are covered, and e5 is covered as well. The only way for this king is to go around to g4, and we'll cover something that white could do, in that kind of scenario later in the game. Here we have the move bishop e3. I just drop the king back, right? Drop the king back, attack that bishop. I bring the king back to c4. I think around here I probably offered a draw. Stuart here, probably took a very long time. I mean, this game went for hours. One of the last games in the entire tournament that round. And, we just kind of kept going, back and forth for a lot of moves. He plays king c7. He tried to, triangulate me by going here and here. I end up just kind of going back and forth, waiting for him to come to d6, in which case I would come back to c4. Although here against king e6, I just kind of play king c4 anyways, right? King d6, even if you do play this, I just make a knight move and I'm fine, right? Again, king d6, I'm not going to move my king because then the king gets more active. I need to keep this king out of the game. That is how I hold on to a draw here. Notice here, king f6 doesn't work, okay? King f6 doesn't work because I have knight d4 attacking this pawn, right? I'm just going to win that pawn there, right? And it's a great game. I mean, if bishop e3, we just go 1-2. Not sure we lose a pawn, but pawn versus pawn, easy draw there. And if black takes here, I am down a pawn, but now black has a big decision to make. Are they going to go to e6 or to g6, right? If they go to g6, I'm going to go straight for that pawn on a5 as one of the possibilities that I have. Just throw this pawn down the board, and we both have a queen each. If I take on c6 with the queen, dead draw. Don't take with the king though. Don't do that, right? Because queen h1, and that would just be a sad loss, right? Who wants that? So going back, we have king takes d4, king g6, dead draw. What about king to e6? Well, in this case, I'm still able to go for that a5 pawn. Black comes here. I end up kind of, swifting my king around. And I end up just promoting to a queen. I was looking at this position. I actually miscalculated it a little bit. Obviously king b6 was also an option. But I was thinking, even if king b6, black would have had queen c5 if it was black's move, and they could have traded off queens. In this case, if it's black's move, black has here. Very easy, right? Trading off. And sure, we're at even material, but who cares? My king is so far out of the way that black will just take this pawn and run down the highway, radiator spring style, and win the game, right? But what I miscalculated is that it's actually white's move here, right? And he calculated it correctly, and that's why he didn't go for this. But yeah, I could just check and go up a pawn, and we'd probably just get a draw here. Game over, right? So king c4 is played. Instead of, black here playing aggressively with king f6, trying to go around or anything like that, we instead just see the move of king e7. I play king d3, king d6, king c4. Here I actually said, hey, we have a free throw repetition. We've seen this position 3 times, and it's been your move each time. But he said, nah, it's not a 3-4 repetition, blah, blah, blah. So we ended up calling over the tournament director. And the tournament director told me that it would have been a draw if I asked him to come over first and then played the move. But apparently, if I play the move first and then call him over, it's not a draw because it's his move. Very weird. I don't know. I didn't know that, so I learned something there. But black, he ended up, king e6, knight e2. I just kept going back and forth. Again, I just got to hold this fortress here, right? I got to hold this fortress here very strong. If black ever gets, super aggressive going over this way, I can always, make up space here. Potentially, even just bring my knight back and just start attacking pawns like crazy. If the king goes here, it's just going to take too long, right? White can hold on. That's the game there. Not a perfect game for me. Thankfully, I was able to set up that fortress. I would say the biggest thing to you guys is, look, knights in the end game are absolutely just nasty. They are, right? They can attack a lot of squares. In this game, we didn't really see my knight do anything crazy, but it could have if black went away, right? The whole reason this king couldn't get away is because we had a knight that was able to attack any pawn in any square. This bishop had nothing on a4. It just couldn't ever be any kind of threat against that pawn for the rest of the game. The only pawn I was worried about losing to that bishop was the pawn on f4, right? So go out there, try to win those games, and when you can't, do everything you can to hold on to a draw. Playing it against a bishop, if you're going up against a dark-squared bishop, put your pawns on light squares and vice versa, right? Make that bishop feel like it barely exists, if it exists at all. Hey guys, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I wanted to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters for the month of April in 2023. Love you guys, and it's been awesome to have you guys as part of the Patreon community. If you haven't joined the Patreon yet, there are some exclusive benefits that you gain from becoming a member. And if you're interested, I will leave a link in the description below.